Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Through inspiring conversations, practical strategies, and actionable insights, we empower educators just like yourself, thought leaders, change makers, and leaders within the educational space to foster trust, collaboration, and academic excellence. Today, we have someone that's going to be talking to us that I am just beyond excited to hear from. I would call him a friend, a colleague, and even a mentor of mine. This gentleman is a Connecticut-based leader with 21 years in education, so much that I can learn from. He served as a teacher and assistant principal in urban and suburban schools, grades 5 through 12. And this gentleman he's absolutely passionate about equity, SEL, and restorative practices, striving to create inclusive environments, empower students and staff, and build thriving school communities. Recently, he was just named the 2025 Connecticut Assistant Principal of the Year for middle schools. He also co-hosts the After School with Admin podcast. And outside of his professional pedigree, he's just an amazing human being. He's a father, he's a husband, and he's somebody that I trust, somebody that I truly believe has inspired and motivated me to be not just a better educator, but a better human being. I'm going to bring Marco to the stage. Marco, how you doing, brother?
Hey, how we doing today?
I am amazing. It's so good to see you. I know we were talking a little bit backstage. It's been too long. So I guess just can you catch me up on what's been going on, but first introduce yourself without using any of your personal or professional titles. How would you introduce who you are?
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words that you said beforehand. It's humbling when someone says things. It always makes you feel a little weird when someone says some of the nice things about you. I'm always one of those. I just believe in always doing the work. So in my mindset, when someone says some of the accolades and things, it's just kind of like, I just expect everyone's always doing the same exact thing. But I appreciate all those words you said. Sure. If I'm trying to just say kind of person I'm a boots on the ground, and I'll do it with you. I don't believe in the mentality of I'm going to tell you what to do or that kind of thing. No matter what I'm doing, we do it together because we have to do it together if you want it to actually work. So I find myself, whether it's, parenting, I try to literally emulate what I'm want my kids to do. I try to be that model and have them do it with me, or we do it, or I'll show them and then they do it. In my own marriage with my beautiful wife, we just celebrated 18 years of marriage and 20 years together. So it's one of those, we do things together. And, she is literally my rock and the person who if it wasn't for her, I don't know if I'd even have accomplished half the things that I do in my life, because she's just one of those people that always pushes and keeps me going with that. And I'd say for when it comes to my work or for any part to it, it's always a belief that we can do it and that we can do it together. So I would say that's always my mentality with it. I never really say no. I'm more of the insurance of let's figure out how we can pull it off to try and help support in any way possible.
First of all, that is phenomenal. And I think a lot of times we hear things and we overlook what it took to being able to even have this perspective and this level of wisdom. Can you talk to us about what did you learn, who mentored you, or what gave you this perspective and how you lead today?
Well, I have to bring it back to my parents, number one. I was like many kids, everyone's got a backstory of things that happened to them in their life. I was blessed to have two very hardworking parents, both immigrants, neither with a college degree, neither, my father had a sixth grade education before he stopped in Italy and started going to work. My mother stopped in high school when she came to America. And they both valued education greatly and felt the need that they wanted always more for their kids, but they wanted to make sure they worked for every aspect of it. My father always had a saying, broken English, Italian accent, would always say, if you're going to do something, you're supposed to do it right. So I've always emulated that feeling that I have to do things correctly and I have to be a hard worker and push through. both of them were that type of 9 to 5, past 5 even hours. My father worked for the water company, so he worked all hours at night at times. He would always pick up the extra shifts because he knew it would benefit the family, but it also was what his job was to do, was to be that worker. And my mom was the same exact thing, worked her way up, never had that college degree, worked her way up to the highest she possibly could do for an insurance company. And those two really taught me that piece in life of my work ethic. But what occurred is, as I said, everyone's got those moments in life that can choose which way they're going to go. Mm-hmm. When I was in middle school, my father became sick with cancer, and he ended up passing away from it. Now, we all know when those moments happen, we have that fight or flight, where you can choose to use it as the fuel to make yourself a better human being, to make them proud, to make everyone else proud, and understand you stand up in those situations to help others. Or it can be the fuel for the crutch that we're going to say for why I can't do anything, because I had this happen to me, and that's why it's not going to be something I could do. I was an individual of, I was going to make them proud. I saw that work that they had, and I was not going to ever hold back in my life. And with that experience, I pushed myself, and I had great mentors along the way, with whether it was coaching in sports, or it was teachers that I had that really helped get me to where I wanted to be. Because, I didn't think I was ever going to be a teacher when I first started. That wasn't in the cards for me. I thought I was going to be either a chef or a police officer, were the two areas. And if it wasn't for those experiences happening to me and the individuals who kind of picked me up and helped me and kept me moving in the right direction, I felt I had to do that back. I wanted to do that back. So that was how I ended up becoming an educator. I actually wrote my college essay on those same teachers that helped me along the way to get me to where I was and why I wanted to do the exact same thing back. And wow, I haven't looked back since.
That's a phenomenal story, from chef to Connecticut Assistant Principal of the Year. Now, are you still a cook? Do you?
Oh, absolutely. That is my happy place after work. Every one of us have that way to settle down and relax. I love cooking dinner. I love cooking for major amounts of people. I cook for my family for most nights. Some nights when I'm late with my kids for practice, if my wife will do the cooking. But if I'm home, I'm doing it. And if we're having people over, I'm the happiest human being. If I'm making 3-course meals for about 10 people, that's put me in that spot.
I will definitely keep that in mind next time I'm in town.
Definitely.
One of the things that you communicated was this idea and this belief and value of doing things right, doing things correctly. How do we, Marco, do things? What does doing things right in education look like for students?
So first and foremost, it's got to be the answer of, is this good for kids? Because we sometimes lose track of that as we think about different things that stress us out, things that go through. We've got to make sure that the number one piece is this what's good for kids? Second, one of the things to kind of put it as in, you've got to move slow to move fast. And I know it sounds silly to say it that way. The Navy SEALs have a statement of slow is steady, steady is fast. And that is because if you do it right and you're starting off slow and you build, you can get more traction and get more done than if you just rush into something and then you got to figure out what you did wrong and fix it along the way. So I find with education that doing it right really means like you're going to take your time, look at it from different angles, figure out some of the pitfalls that may happen and build upon it. And again, like I said earlier, you have to do it together. When I speak with my staff that I work with, I always tell them we are in this together. I may not be the foremost knowledgeable in it, but we are going to do it together to make sure that we are successful. Because this way I can feel it the same way the way they're feeling it, and we can make sure that it is going to support kids.
When we're talking about this idea of creating community and essentially ownership, before we can approach this from the lens of doing what's best for kids, it requires a buy-in. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I'm sorry. It was spinning for a few seconds. I just caught the last words of it requires a buy-in.
So when you're thinking about creating this impact and this essential, this bridge to doing what's right for children, it requires a buy-in and an ownership, which oftentimes is at many educational institutions, and not just educational institutions, organizations as a whole. When the cultural foundation is cracked, it's hard for us to be able to build a cohesive community that is moving towards a singular goal or mission. or I guess the question is, what are some specific ways that you focus as a leader on building community before you can get them on the same page to accomplishing goals?
I think you have to first be reflective. You have to be willing to build that trust that you can reflect upon your own practices and what you bring to the table and what you need support in to help to start to build off of each other. Because everyone wants to have a voice, everyone wants to be heard in the process. But we also have to make sure that we are open and being vulnerable enough to know when we aren't able to do things right and we need support in it. So when you start, you really got to be able to have that process of reflecting upon what you're doing and what that can affect others with. An example that we did was we had to do a lot of work on ourselves as a school when we started to do some of our equity work that we were doing. We really needed to focus in on our own thoughts and biases and how we grew up and what we think education is first, before we can then try to help to create spaces that are positive, spaces that are safe, to create these feelings and curriculum and actions for students to feel safe in our building. Because if we don't feel that way, and if we don't understand where we're coming from, we can't help others. We have this statement of I know I don't know, or I think I know, but I don't know, or I know I don't know. Each of those are different ways of thinking when you look at it for some of the work, because you have to find that out first, what you know and what you bring, before you can start to move forward. Because once you've done that, you kind of have your basis level, so we know where we're at, and then we can start to build upon it for any information that we need to do. So when you're saying about that culture for it, you've got to make sure there's that trust that you can have those conversations, and you got to be willing to know where you stand in those conversations.
Let's say you're a new leader and it's day one for you. You're a young leader. How do you approach this work from day one? And how long do you think that it takes to even building a solid culture and community within schools? Like, what are the step-by-step processes that you would use?
Well, first you have to know why the culture is the way it is already. An example that, like I was put in, I use this a lot of times when I talk with individuals about, before you talk about tearing down walls, find out why the walls were put up in the first place. You do that for a reason, because you find out what's the reasons for this. Why are people coming at it this way or looking at it this way? We think about it all the time. That happens in our own lives. We have personal beliefs, we have values, but they came from somewhere. We have to know that first before you start talking about the things you want to implement or the things you want to do. Second, you got to nudge before you start to change, meaning as in you got to find ways, where are some small altercations to what we're doing that is consumable and manageable at the same time. So meaning as in there's small things you're trying to change and do. At the same time, staff can feel comfortable making those without feeling it's a giant leap of faith. That helps build that trust and that ability. Now, determining on what you're doing determines on the buy-in you need. Mm-hmm. And I say it that way because, when I'm working with our equity work, it honestly started with about 20% of the staff agreeing with it and believing in it. Now that sounds, for educators, that's a scary sight, because when we think of anything in education, if 80% of the people don't believe in it and don't agree with it, it usually means it's wrong.
I agree.
In this format, especially when it comes to this, you've got to build slow and build upon it. Because if you can get 20% to understand it, and then 20 more percent get it, and then 20 more percent get it, now you have the majority are starting to follow with what we're trying to do, exactly. And the rest start to buy in along the way. You've got to see about your process. For me, I believe most things take almost a 3-year process to do, because if you're really doing it right, your first year is on the reflection and small changes. Second year is really the learning process and trying to find ways to put more implementation in, to the third year where you're now officially implementing it completely and you're looking for minor revisions to it. So say an example being restorative practices. Restorative practices is a new way of thinking of disciplinary actions and school climate. That's the big component. Most people think of just the disciplinary action side. They don't think of the school climate side of it all, which that's 80% of the work you're really doing, is building a positive environment that students feel comfortable to have conversations in, students feel comfortable taking risks in. you do that first. So you first look at where you're at and what your actual vulnerability, what your trust is, and your feelings of your own school environment are. And then you find ways, how can you start to show yourself within that environment more?
What does that look like, though, Marco?
It could be as simple as in actually decorating your room with your own life. And I know it sounds silly to say that, but there are teachers, and it happens. And I get it, because determining on the different, environment of where you're at, they may not feel comfortable putting out even just like photos of their family.
Why do you think it is?
Well, it matters, I think, a lot of times on the environment of your district. I can tell you in past districts I've had, the focus was not on school culture and climate. It was all about academics. And they felt if they focused hard on academics only, climate didn't matter because the climate will fix itself. That was a problem because no student felt comfortable in the building to take any risks or do anything. So that meant the academics were a problem because they never were willing to try things they were not good at or be able to say, I don't know how to do this. So your culture was gone, and students never felt connected to the building. So it didn't matter if they came or not in their mind. So they could miss 4 or 5 days and their mindset was like, I'm not a part of this community. They don't care whether I'm here or not. So why am I coming every day? So when I say that kind of that answer of showing things, like some school districts will feel that way. It's not everywhere. And some people also have the internal belief of that because they also had teachers or staff members when they were kids who didn't do that. And since they were successful, they didn't think they had to do that too. So like that was one of the things we first did with our staff was like, let the kids know you're human. Like just go through, like put up pictures of your family, talk about that, bring up examples when they bring up their, like, say they were at a dance competition this weekend. And you speak to them about it going, oh, you know what? My daughter's in dance too. Like, oh, it's crazy how much those uniforms can go. Like things like that. All of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a minute. I know something about you now. Yeah. That gives a little feeling more. Or you're trying to find out some more pieces of their life, some of their culture, some of their backgrounds. I always give the example of when I first started teaching, I had a Jamaican student that was misbehaving. I had to redirect him in class. I pulled him out of class to speak with him. Now, in Italian culture, you look an adult in the eye. Always. Need to look an adult in the eye because if you're not, you're being disrespectful. In Jamaican culture, you never look an adult in the eye because you're being disrespectful if you're looking. You look down if we're talking to you. Yeah. So my culture was interfering with his culture when he was trying to show respect, and I was treating it like he was being a disrespectful student. It's knowing pieces like that help to develop and change, because once I learned that, I was able to create a better connection with that student, and we were able to stop some of the issues that were happening.
I want to stay there for a second because that's a powerful point. How do we find that intersection between this is my culture, this is how I grew up, this is what I want to do as a leader, as an educational leader, versus students and understanding where they are? But then also another layer, Marco, is the teacher. How do you bring everyone together so that everyone still feels seen, respected, valued in the multitude of diversity of thoughts, religions, perspectives?
So there's multiple ways you have to do it. So one, you've got to look at through your professional learning that you're giving for your staff members. So meaning as in, it's not so much professional learning and saying, here are the different cultures. It's more about understanding that there are different beliefs around the world than just the ones we came from. Reflecting in that professional learning on what are our areas that we bring to the table and why we bring that, and why that may not actually fit with some of our students we have, because maybe the district that we're in, meaning as in the town that we're in, is not populated the same way that we grew up in. We want to know this. We got to think about also the way that kids went and learned. When I was in school, it was straight rows, sit down, shut up, face forward. And you have to listen to everything being done. Now we like more interactive classes. We try to get students involved in groups. We have to understand that there's differences. If we can do that part, then we can start to learn and start to change a little bit of that group. The major one then after that, talk to the students. If you are an adult, speak to a student. It's okay. You can ask them those pieces. One thing we do in our school is we have 3 committees. I have a student equity group, I have a parent equity group, and I have my staff equity group. All 3 of them are connected in letting us know what is going on in the building, both academically, socially, and through our discipline practices, and giving us feedback on what we are doing to make sure that all voices are heard. So we have an understanding of what's happening. So we can look at it, we can revise it if we need to find out if we are maybe making some biases or if we are maybe causing some issues in the building because of the practices we have in place. We look at the structures to make sure that they are being altered for what we have with us in our community. It also allows the entire community to buy in because they have a voice in the process.
What does that look like in practice, though, Marco, with these various committees?
So the way our committees work, we do it pretty much on Thursdays are all of our committee work. And we have a through line through all of our practices. We have our school goals. So our school goals are created that go through. One is usually with academics, meaning as in one of the things we're trying to do for us specifically, as always, is increase the performance of literacy and numeracy of all of our students. But we're also looking right now to close the opportunity gap. Now, we understand closing it is going to take time, but we're trying to keep lowering that gap over and over again, year by year, specifically with our Black and brown students. Yeah. And what we're doing with this is we are looking at our curriculum. We are looking at how we are instructing. We are looking at the expectations that we have for students in the class. Are we having high expectations for everyone? And we're looking at our discipline practices to seeing if there are any areas that we need to, one, support students and staff in on how we teach it and how we do it. And two, do we have any biases occurring within that? So when you ask, how do we do all this? We have these three committees at the top, meaning as in each of them get a different day. We meet with them. We have a presentation that's based off of the work, those three goals that we have between our curriculum, our social emotional learning, and then our discipline practices. They provide feedback to us in those meetings based off of what we're doing and how we are doing it and what we're looking at. From there, that equity team, that's our staff equity team, hears from both what the parents and the students said. They come and they look at what is going to be our next line of actions that we're going to do. What we do from there is it breaks down to kind of our committee group. So this way, that group looks at the overarching picture. We move down now into our school climate team, then breaks it down the social emotional side of it all and the discipline side. And our instructional leadership team looks at what instructional strategies or curriculum changes we need to do. So as you go through, you have big idea, decision-making of looking at it, providing feedback. Equity team then goes and determines what are the three big components we would be doing, meaning as in one for academics, one for social emotional learning, one for discipline. And then we have the smaller committees will actually put that into action. So what we use is each one as a through line, so all voices are heard, and there is components inside the entire building, so every person feels a part of the actual process of making these decisions. And I say feels a part of it because, as we know, not all voices will always be used, meaning as in you give that voice, you give that opinion. It doesn't mean that's exactly what we're going to do, but at least you gave your actual opinion into it, so at least it may be a slight component of what we're going to change and do for our revisions or our academic actions that we're going to be having. It may not be the full action, but it might be a component of it. With that, you feel more willing to be a part of the work because you've actually had a say in it.
You know, Marco, one of the things that I've learned about you in the almost a year that we've connected and known each other is that equity is a cornerstone of your leadership. And it's a cornerstone I love of what you're doing as a school as well. And I'm very familiar with some of the things that you guys are doing in the equity work. But can you describe or really talk about what does equity look like in practice at your school and why this work is so important?
Absolutely. So for me, what equity is at our school is providing all students with the supports they need where they're at. Meaning we try our best, because we know we still make mistakes. We're human. We try our best to look at each of those areas of practice. How are we looking curriculum-wise to make sure that all students are represented in it? We call it mirrors and windows when we say it. Do students see themselves in the curriculum or see their way into other people's lives within it? How are we then teaching it? Is it engaging and rigorous with what we're asking? Are we pushing students to their level they need? Meaning we are not just making an overarching, we're just doing extra work, or we're saying we're going to do this level. It's got to be to where they are at and making sure we are pushing to help support them to get them to that next level and believe in them that they can hit it. In the social emotional side, it's making sure representation is there. No matter whether we're talking about your religious beliefs, it's your sexuality, it is your ethnicity. we have every one of them being a part of the process and the conversation pieces. Okay, when we do our advisory lessons, we're teaching those soft skills that are going to help students be a part of the real world, but at the same exact time, and I say real world, we say it that way for when they leave us in school and they are now officially in job opportunity stuff, they're able to survive in those areas. But also we do this so this way each person gets a chance to understand that every person in this school has a right to be here and has the right to a positive day. And no one else in this building has the right to take that away from somebody else. And then when it comes to that discipline practices, it's making sure that we are not putting spotlights on specific students based off of our biases that we have had throughout our lives. And I say it that way because every one of us have had biases in our lives because our experiences, our beliefs, our values that we've been taught since little kids, our educational systems we've been through, determine the way we look at things now. And we think that because it worked for us, a lot of the times we think it's going to work for everyone else. And the idea sometimes is that if we make students assimilate to what we want them to do, it's going to make them successful. And that's not always the case. Some of those kids need to look at it in a different way to be successful. Just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for them. My work ethic might not be the work ethic of another kid. He also may not need to do, or she may not need to do half the things I do because they might be even smarter. And I say it that way because I wasn't the best kid when it came to it. I was a B student, but I worked for every B I had. There are kids out there who don't need to do half the work I did and still be able to ace the test. That means that we need to push them in a different way. Exactly. We have to look at those sides of it. So when I think of that equity work, I'm thinking of those pieces to it. And one of the biggest areas is our Black and brown students because we do know whether we have the opportunity gap there. We also know that many of them don't feel comfortable in the environments they're in because of past experiences. And it's up to us to get them to feel comfortable in this area and to understand our own biases are affecting the way that their comfort zones are. And if we can't do that, that's a struggle. And we got to make sure that we are doing it because it needs to happen.
Why does this need to happen, Marco? Why is this work so important? I've talked to school leaders often, and there's this, what I love about your school and your leadership is that you are doing all things well. Now, there's some areas at every school where we can grow, but you're prioritizing equity work. You're prioritizing SEL, but also prioritizing high academic standards. And it shows that it's possible to focus on all of these areas. Why is this so important to be engrossed in doing this work, but also how can you successfully do it collectively and all together?
So first and foremost, the reason why it's so important, there are kids. I'm not in charge of 80% of my kids. I'm in charge of 100% of my kids. Every one of those kids their parents entrusted their time in our building to myself, my principal, my teachers, my support staff to do everything we can to help them be successful. We can't say that we're going to just go and do it for these kids and these kids alone because that's the majority of the kids we have in our building. And it works for the majority of them, so we're not going to do anything for the ones who it doesn't work for. That doesn't happen. We have to think about every single kid, and every single kid matters. Wherever they're at, whatever they look like, whatever they feel, they matter. And we need to make sure they matter. And we have to find a way to help support them in any way we can. Because we don't get to make that decision on their life of the way that they should think and look and feel. We need to go and help support the way they think, they look, they feel. So I look at that as first and foremost when we ask that question of why we're doing this, because it's important. It's important because every kid matters and every kid in our building was entrusted to us to make sure they are successful. Now, when you ask the question of how do you do it collectively, again, slow steps. It takes time. And I'm going to be honest, I can give a blueprint right now, but it doesn't mean that's going to work for your school that you go to. And I just got to say it because every school is different. You know, I mean, I say it that way, and that's the big thing. Sometimes when I go to professional learnings and things, you know, people come through and they're just like, here are the 5 things you need to do. It's like, that's not true because your school may not be, that may not work for your school. What I like to do when I give it, I give the roadmap of what we did. And I say to people, like, you have to think about your own school based off the work we did. What could work for you in these formats of what we did? How did that work for us that maybe could work for you or you could add in? So when my principal and I give presentations, we always ask that we try to, as we go through steps of it, we'll stop and ask the question of what might be your entry point here, or what might be this, and try to let them have dialogue with other people at their tables or discussions to figure out that part. Because for us, it took time. We started, before we even started our equity work, we were starting with our restorative practice work. We looked at our school culture. We looked at our pieces of how are we connecting with the kids, and how do we implement pieces of restorative practices in to help that proactive 80% before we get into the reactive 20% that are discipline issues that happen. How are we teaching it? How are we understanding it? How are we modeling for kids? We did that first. And once we started to see some progress through that, we realized that was the entry point for us now to start really having the deeper conversations about where are our biases and where are our thought process now affecting what's happening next in our classes. And that's where that equity work started to come into play, and we were able to take some deep dives. We actually had to start for us, because we do know it is hot button topics with a lot of people. We get it, and now I'm not going to say that it's not for individuals. But I think, as we know, there are many misinformations that out about it all. We started with the process of using the book from Zaretta Hammond, Culture Responsive Teaching in the Brain. So it did the connection of culture and brain activity and the work there, and how can we look at instructional strategies before we moved into the book, Courageous Conversations About Race, where we broke that book down into understanding about race and getting a better feeling and reflection of where we are in it. And one of the things we did that was a major component of it, we keep what's called, one of their agreements, keeping everything local, personal, immediate, is one of their areas. We made sure every single time we did a professional learning, we locked it back to our school district. We didn't want, or our town. We didn't want it to be a situation of that. We talk about things, and then where it's kind of like this overarching idea. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't matter here. It's like, oh no, it did. Because here's an example of how it happened in our own district. So we tried to do that to keep people in the thought process of it, to understand, reflect, and move forward. So that allowed us to get deeper into our thinking. And again, my principal and I made the conversation of, we are not experts. We always made the statement of, like, we are going to be in the mud with you. Like, I felt extremely uncomfortable in my first courageous conversations I had with individuals.
Walk me through what that was like, Marco.
Well, it's the, you know what it is? It is the thing. I said this multiple times with individuals that I would talk with it. I was always afraid I was going to screw it up and make things worse rather than better. And that's a fear a lot of people have, who are willing to do the work. Then there are others who just don't want to do it because they don't believe in it. Now, for me, I was afraid of that. And I had a friend who I do the podcast with. His name is Des Caldwell. He literally said to me, he's like, you got to stop saying that and you have to do it. He's like, just get into it. He goes, he's like, if you're waiting for a good time, it's not going to come.
That's good.
He's like, if you wait for the perfect moment, it's not going to happen. He's like, just get into it, mess up, try to get your way out of it and figure everything out.
That's good.
And he was right. I just started to now officially have conversations, and you got to work your way through it. Sometimes it's going to go not the way you want, and you got to find your way, and you're kind of head on a swivel, like figuring it out, go, no, okay, maybe I got to change my questioning here, things like that. But you've got to be willing to do that, because once you do it, and even when you screw up, other people see it too and go, okay, it's not that bad if I screw up too. Maybe I can try this. And it gets people willing to do more. So you've got to have that ability to find vulnerability and be able to trust that you will work it out and get through it. And once you start to do that and you build slow, like I said earlier, you can get the successes you want. And this last year we had, to kind of show like the idea of like what could happen over years. This last year we decreased the opportunity gap in both literacy and numeracy in all 4 grade levels of our school. We increased in our state standardized test in literacy and numeracy in 3 of the 4 grade levels, and all 4 grade levels in literacy and 3 of the grade levels in numeracy. We decreased suspensions again, and we decreased referrals, level 2 referrals, which are disciplinary actions that come from the main office. Again, so like we are seeing success.
Exactly.
As long as you're willing to try it and go through it. And one of the things is you got to celebrate it afterwards. Like we went through and I explained to the staff at the end of the year, I'm like, I need you to sit back because I know it's been a stressful year. I told them all because we did a lot of work. I said, let's take a look at the board and see everything we did. And we went through it. I'm like, you need to take a bow. You did a great job this year. The work's not done, but we did a lot and we had a lot of success. And we want you to know that you did an amazing job. And that was something we needed to do, I think, for staff to kind of keep them moving, going like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. We can get this going. And it worked.
What do you wish that more administrators knew or understood about restorative leadership?
A willingness to do it. You know, a lot of it is not anything new. And I say it that way because the proactive side of it all is building a school culture, building school climate, making sure that we are reflecting and looking on our own selves and seeing what we can do and like building within ourselves first. A lot of admins, I shouldn't say a lot, but people first see it and get worried by it because they have the same exact comment of it's kumbaya. It's not no one's held accountable. Nothing happens with it. That's not true. It's looking at it differently. A lot of the stuff people are already doing, it's just being more intentional in how we do it. And then from there, it's modeling and being the actual teachers that we already are for students. We're not adding to a plate. We're not making it like now you have to teach this too. It's like you're just doing it. As a human being, when you are showing it, students are watching. And that teaches them those pieces. And that builds that belief in the connection. And once you start to get that in your class, you start to be able to then have that reactive side, which is you sit down and you can talk with each other after an incident happens. You still receive a consequence with them, but it's about building a relationship or bridging that gap that happened after something occurred to help that. So that's like that disciplinary side of it all, where you're connecting and you're rebuilding your culture. Restorative, when I think of it like academic wise, it's allowing students to feel vulnerable enough to tell you when they are not comfortable in an area, so you can hold them to that high expectation without causing them to shut down. And that's what you want. You want students to feel comfortable after in class to know, I know that Mr. King's got my back and that he's going to hold me. And it's frustrating because he's never going to let me stop. He's going to keep making me do this extra work, but he's also going to commend me when I do it right. He's going to hold me to that standard. It's like, listen, I'll stay here today after school with you if I have to, but we're getting it done because this is what you need. Like, that's what they're looking for. And every student wants that. And that's where you get that in that restorative model. But a lot of people think it's a daunting task to do, or they have a misconception of it altogether. And it's really not. All of that is just building that relationships, that environment that is safe, that's understanding first, and then building from there into the expectations and the reactions of what you can do when something wrong happens.
Throughout our conversation, you've interchanged culture and climate. Mm-hmm. For anyone that's listening that doesn't understand, and we had this conversation, I remember in your office when I was there, walk me through the difference between school culture and school climate.
So for me, when I think of those two words, school culture is what you do and climate is how you do it. So when you think of it that way, like what you do, meaning as in my values, my beliefs, that is your culture, what you are holding, your expectations that you have. Following that, your climate is how do we go about doing that day to day? How do we represent that day to day? That's the difference in those areas. So when I'm talking about my culture, it's what I think, feel as I come into that building. So when I'm in my building and I'm walking through and I understand that what people are believing in themselves, what they have, their values, they're holding dear, that's that. Then the climate is how do they actually represent those beliefs every day? So my climate is if I'm seeing kids picking up garbage when they're walking down the hallway. Well, my culture is about respect and responsibility and mindfulness in my building. That's the difference when I think of those pieces. So one is the overarching, while the other one is those examples, those day-to-days of how you do it.
What's one thing that you think a school leader can do tomorrow to begin building a more inclusive culture?
You got to model it, but you also got to be able to hear from your actual staff what they believe. Because I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of the times is we all have different beliefs for specific words and statements. And I say it that way because like if you were to go to like your next presentation you give and you say, I want everyone in here to write on a piece of paper the word respect and define it for me. And then give me an example of what respect looks like. You are going to get about 30 different versions of it.
Exactly.
And we did that. We actually did that when we rebuilt our culture. We went through, we had, we were doing multiple meetings of that reflection again of who we are, what we're doing kind of through our professional learning. And we got to the point where we finally went, we're going to be developing 3 behavior expectations for our school. We want to drill down what is it we really want from kids and staff, because we told everyone this is not just a student thing. This is what we believe and we hold ourselves to also. And we had to help individuals really frustrate individuals, but we had to help them to get down to what were the specific things they wanted. So like an example being someone started bringing up cell phones and saying like, if we can just get rid of cell phones in the classrooms. I said, okay, what happens when a student brings a cell phone to your class? They said, well, they're distracted by it. Okay. Then what do you do? Well, I remind them to put it away. And if they don't put it away, I take the phone away. Okay. Then what happens? Well, they just take it. I'm like, okay, now what are you feeling when this is happening? What's actually occurring? Well, they're breaking a rule. And how does that make you feel when they break a rule? Well, I feel disrespected because there it is. You want to be respected in your class. Well, yeah, I want to be respected. Okay. That's really with the crux of everything you're asking for. It has nothing to do with the electronic. It has to do with the fact that you want to have respect in your class. So we had to take that. And we said, once we did that, I'm like, now take all those words you guys had written down that you were talking about. Let's see if we can break it down to the exact things that we're really looking for. And the staff were able to break it down to respect and responsible. And then the last one was kind of a hodgepodge. It came out to safety, but the students, when we showed all this to students, they said, I like the word mindful. I think mindful is where it needs to be instead. So our words became, we will, as at John Wallace, which is our school, we are respectful, we are responsible, and we are mindful. And that is where we came up with. And then we worked on a full definition of each of those words. And then we worked on what does that look like in every section of the building. Now, not examples being like it looks like as in I am picking up trash. What are the actual statements of what that is that I'm doing? Because that's an example of it. And we had to go through some scenarios with staff. And I explained to them, like, what's the difference between a compliance and a behavior? Because there's many things that people were asking for. It's like, I could learn with my hood up. Like, I know we tell kids to take it down, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm going to be learning from it. That's a compliance issue. You want a kid to take his hood down because that's compliance. Yeah. That's not a situation of an actual behavior we're asking from them. The behavior was that you felt disrespected because you'd ask them to do it and they wouldn't take it down. That's 2 separate things. So we had to help out with staff of understanding what's compliance things we're asking for. Like, is that something we need to really focus on for learning? And that happened even when we did our dress code, individuals feeling, well, kids are not going to perform as well. Our scores have gone up and our attendance has gone up since we changed our dress code to allow for much more altercations for clothes than we did before. Wow. The basic ones that aren't allowed, meaning as in inappropriate language, weapons, things like that on shirts and things. But no longer do we have that a female can't wear a spaghetti strap or a tank top or, having a specific length when we say to the skirt or to the shorts. We got rid of a lot of those things because we realized they were not appropriate. And they really were affecting only specific people, meaning females.
Exactly.
Or if it said, a person can't wear a handkerchief on their head. That was geared back in the day when it was originally made, probably in the 90s, toward Black and brown individuals. And now we removed all that and kids feel comfortable wearing what they want and they're in class and they're learning. That's what we need. There were so many things that we had to take a second look at and realize. And that's why we went through that process to help individuals see that. So you kind of have to start slow again and understand and take a second to realize where are our thoughts coming from. So then we can start to develop our unified thought that we're going to work with as a school.
My mind is blown in this conversation. I know that we've talked a lot about this, but just hearing it now and seeing it in practice is phenomenal. How often, somebody listening right now, how often do you do this work? And I want to touch a little bit about data and how you track data. But how often do we go and reassess dress code, or we reassess the values, or we reassess these statements? What does that look like?
So each year, I would say this, every month we meet. Each of these committees are meeting and looking and determining on how well each thing's working. So every month we use Thursdays as our day. First Thursday of the month is our equity team. Second one's our school climate. Third one's our SEL. Fourth one's our discipline. On Wednesday, one Wednesday a month is our instructional leadership team. Every single Wednesday, every grade level meets on Wednesdays at a specific meeting time to go and discuss things within the grade level. So one being as in kind of those, what they need to discuss, like brooms and brushes, we call it, that would be answers of like, field trips coming up, stuff like that. Then we have our problems of practice on two of the Wednesdays per month, which is really about taking a look at our practices. Do we need to alter anything, change anything? Are we struggling with any pieces? How can we help each other? And our last one is our courageous conversation each month, which is a conversation around race, but also around something that is happening, whether it's inside of our district, inside of our building, or that connects to our professional learning that we're doing to help keep the conversation and the reflection occurring so we can continue to learn and continue to grow on it. So when you ask us like how we're doing, we're always constantly looking at it throughout the year to make sure that there's any things we have to change, but yearly we would then make our altercations that we would need to do. And so far we've been good, just little tweaks here and there, nothing major when you think about how we do things.
Now, what happens, Marco, and what I've learned is a lot of times where there's a transition of leadership, a lot of the work that you're currently working on not falls away, but there's how can you create a system where if you ever were to leave and come to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm trying to recruit you to live, what happens and how can you ensure sustainability?
That's all about the structures you put in place and also the ability to trust in your staff to lead. So when I say those two things, number one, it's the structures we put in place. What we've done are not things that would say it's me doing or my principal, though we are the ones facilitating it and we're the facilitators in the beginning. These are all structures in place in our building that if we were to leave, stay and continue to work. Exactly. Meaning as in those Wednesday meetings are set. Those Thursday committees are set. We use those to develop what happens next. So our structures are in place in our building. And it took time. Some of these meetings were there, but we had to alter how they were run. Some of those committees were there. Some of them had to be dissolved. Some of them had to be joined together and created to make sure they saw a through line for all the work we're doing. Once you create that through line, that structures are in place, everything's interchangeable. And what I say by like developing staff, we are at a point now where we trust in our staff to lead them. So those committees I go to, but I'm not the leader of those committees. I'm at every meeting, but I sit. We have individuals who take the lead and start the discussion. The best way to put it, it's like King Arthur in the round table. Like I am not the leader of it. I'm a part of the conversation. Exactly. We make these decisions together. And the same thing goes for those Wednesday meetings. We have facilitators that go through that. It's just wraps around for every person in it. It's not me running it. It is the facilitators in that grade level meeting that make the determinations of it. So you want to think about getting to that point. And the greatest thing we've done now, we actually have all of our professional learning is taught by teachers rather than us. So this last year, the way we developed our professional learning, which was the next step to it, we have 4 teachers who taught each component. So we had 4 teachers who taught the CRP, which is our culture responsive pedagogy. We had 4 teachers who taught the disciplinary professional learning. And we had 4 teachers that taught the SEL section. And all staff went through those, leapfrogging throughout the year. And we didn't treat it as in, we are going to teach you this. It was more of a focusing of our lens on what we're doing at this time to keep people always thinking about our goals, keep people always thinking about what they're doing in their classes, to be reflective along the way. So when you think of a professional learning that's not your admins leading it, I don't need to be there. If I leave tomorrow, that professional learning still happens. It still goes in that same group because the teachers are now working within themselves to keep it going and making sure that happens. Takes time to build, but when you get it up and running, it's fantastic. It's amazing to see.
Marco, you're doing a lot of things. You have a podcast, you're a family man, you're a leader. How do you stay grounded, but then also inspired to continue to do this work?
I don't sleep, number one. I'm a goer. I think, what is it? It's that statement about idle hands. Like, I mean, like that's, I'm not that person. Like I'm an up at 4:30 in the morning. My way of staying grounded is in the mornings, I get my own personal time, which is my workout time. I love to work out. It's like my way of zenning in. I do that before any of my family gets up, and then I'm home to be able to help out with the kids, get myself for school. I give 110 here at school, but then I get a chance to give back with the community because I help coach. So because my own kids go to the same town that I live in, but I coach within the town. So I love doing that too. My thing is I want to give back at all times. Like that's how I keep myself grounded, because we know this job is stressful. It's daunting. It happens, but it's also the most rewarding job that we possibly could have. I was actually talking with an individual 2 days ago. He is a paraprofessional in another district, and he was thinking of stopping because, he was thinking maybe going corporate, working at an insurance company, and he's saying about how, it's because he's not sure if he wants to go back to school again to get a new degree. And I said, I understand that completely. And I said, but I can tell you right now, when you finish 20, 30 years of working at that insurance company, you're going to feel like you've done nothing because there was no part to it.
Gosh, Marco.
Again, listen, I know it sounds mean, but like you can love your job. I get it. It's great, but it's a job. Like it's just what it is. It's a job. When you come home after 30 years of working education, you've put your fingerprint on something and you've helped others.
That's good. There
are multiple times that I can tell you across my life that I've ran into people that I haven't even spoken to in years that were students of mine who'll be like, wow, Mr. Trillo, I want you to know I loved having your class, or, it was great to kind of see. It was great meeting you again. It was awesome. Like I remember this, and this, or, hey, Mr. Trillo, you really helped me with this. Like from when I coached and stuff, like those are the types of things that you can't get anywhere else besides education. So when I think about like, when you say about like, how do I stay grounded? This is me. I do this. This is my job. This is also my life. I want to help others. I want to always, I don't understand if we can do it, why you wouldn't do it is my thought process.
What's your advice, Marco, to that person that's listening right now that is on the fence, is saying that this is my last year in education, or I'm open to finding other opportunities? What's your advice to that person?
I think everyone goes through that. I think everyone has those struggles, has those feelings. But I would always ask them to try and think about why they got into education in the first place. What made them love the idea of being an educator in the first place? And I want them to try and find that again for one more year and see how that could go. We can constantly get beat down and, burnt out. It happens. I'm not going to make believe it doesn't. I try my best to help staff, but I guarantee there's probably days that I probably push that on them too. And I try my best to help each other and get them to understand, take their breaks, know your limits, and move forward with it. But at the same time, again, it's the most rewarding job there is. And I just try to get staff to see that. Stay for one more. Think about what was the joy that brought you here in the first place and find it again. Because that's the thing you really want. Let's go. Again, you might enjoy those days working at, an insurance company, working at whatever it is. But in the end, what do you feel when you leave that besides, okay, I worked and I went home? Like, in the end, you did something. Or those days, if you're in a high school, you go to graduation, there's that kid that graduated that you never expected to graduate because he was sitting there crying his face off because he couldn't believe he got it done. Yeah. Or that kid you saw go from, if you were from kindergarten all the way to 6th grade, and you watch them change and grow. Or through middle school, where I'm at now, where you get to see them go from little 5th graders to 8th graders. And you're like, oh my God, they're going to high school. And then they come back and visit you when they're in the high school. You're like, wow, you look like you ate yourself. You're like 7 feet tall now, man. Like, what happened to you? Like, there's no greater feeling. There's no one else who gets that opportunity in life to do those things and get a chance to say, I feel like I've done something when my days are done. And I think that's what I'm trying to tell people on.
What's next for you, Marco? What's next for you in your leadership journey?
Don't know. I'm kind of I keep working. Would I love to be a principal one day? Sure. And I'll wait when that time comes. It'll come. But, right now I'm super excited about the upcoming school year. I'm ready to go again. We're at that point. All paperwork is almost done. Kind of the way I always put it is like, the table's set. let's see how we're going for this next year. Let's give it the best we can. We'll see. I live now in a world where I don't try to say what's going to happen or try to say I won't do anything anymore, because I think I've said that so many times in my life and I've gone against it, that it's just, why am I saying it anymore? I always said, I'm never going to leave teaching. I'm going to never become an admin. Became an admin. Then I was like, I never wanted to become a principal in my entire life. I'm looking at principal jobs if one were to ever open.
Yeah.
I said, I never want to go get my doctorate. I've looked at doctorate programs now. It's like, you never know. Why hold yourself to saying this is what's next, or this is whatever comes my way, I'll make that decision when that happens. But until then, I'm super excited for another school year.
Marco, this has been phenomenal. I honor you. I'm always grateful to connect with you. Where can people find you and follow your work? Tell me a little bit about your podcast as well.
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on, we have an After School with the Admins, LinkedIn, Facebook page, Instagram, and TikTok. So you can find clips from each of our shows on that. You can go and find our podcast, After School with the Admins. It's myself and my co-host, Des Caldwell. He is another educator of over, I think he's at 23, maybe 24 years of education. He's been a principal, an assistant principal. He's taught in different states. He's an amazing human being with unbelievable stories and advice. Him and I worked together in my past district, and it was just always loved having conversations with him. So we just keep that going. And really, my podcast is all about getting an opportunity to talk. We try to give out experiences that we've had and try to give advice if we can. And just hearing from admins and educators from across the nation and all the amazing things they're doing. We're lucky enough that we've had individuals from everywhere from Indiana to Connecticut to Jersey to Delaware. It's just been really cool to kind of get a chance to talk to all sorts of people, and we just try to keep that going as much as possible. So you can find that on Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Apple, all the above. So, yep.
That's good, Marco. 60 seconds. You have 60 seconds, and you leave an encouraging or inspiring word. What would you say?
Just do the work. Find a way to do it. Get in the mud, feel the fact of it's going to get sticky. It's going to get dirty, but you'll find a way to get through it, and you'll find a way to help others with it. Remember that. And then you can always figure a way to help out kids.
That was amazing. That was amazing. Remember, any of our listeners, do the work. Commit to kids, commit to doing this work on a daily basis. Follow Marco on all of his different channels. They'll be in the bio below. And again, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King. And before we finish, I want you to ask yourself this one question this week. What kind of culture am I spreading? Culture is everywhere and in anything. Make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode.